So having a look at what's there, we have a simple FME workspace, which uses the ArcGISOnlineConnector, connects to my feature service, and you notice it has the action of get details. So it's just getting the metadata and data set details for that feature service. So I'm just going to go ahead and run that. And I wanted to point out the view of this from Data Inspector. So when you bring this up in Data Inspector, you can see the metadata tags that Bruce was updating, things like summary and description. I'm going to focus on the metadata XML. So all of that information is also contained in this XML document, and that's just another view of that metadata. But we can also use that to do updates, to update all that superset of ArcGISOnline metadata. So the first thing I have to do is blank it out. Unlike the metadata properties, the typical details, I can't just write null. I actually have to use an XML template that's valid XML. So that's one hint there. Make sure you're writing valid XML. If not, it'll come out the rejected port. So you can see this ran successfully. So now we're going to jump over to ArcGISOnline. And when we refresh this view, you will see a lot of the details and extent information disappears. So you can see the description is none. And then if I wander over to the metadata, you can see there's no title. And if I go down into the extents, there's nothing there. Yeah, it just seems to show like Africa or something. Now that we've reset that metadata, how can we harvest from the geodatabase? So I'm reading a dozen or eight or nine different feature types. I get the bounds from that. I have a timestamp that I'm generating so we know when it's last updated. The aggregator is concatenating things like a list of all the feature classes. I'm generating an extent string for JSON because that might be useful down the road. And then I have a description here, which is dynamically generated from categories and a list of feature classes in the data. So there's lots of other things we could add, but I just wanted to have a few examples and you can extend that. So here's where we're using the XML templater, which functions like a mail merge where we merge values in. You could see I was merging in the extent values that the bounding box accumulator generated. And then I'm going to go ahead and write that with the ArcGISOnlineConnector. You'll notice here that instead of update details, which what Bruce was using, I'm using replace metadata XML. So that's the key. So we're going to operate on updating that XML as opposed to the details. So we can see we just ran that. We'll go back to ArcGISOnline, the view of my feature service, refresh that, and then we'll see that there's a bit more information, title and description that gets written to it. And then if we go over to the viewer and editor, we can see there's a little bit more information in there as well. So besides the title, there's author, again, that description, and then the extents, you can see the extents have also been updated. So that's all automated. We could run this across hundreds of data sets. The whole point here being this is scalable, so you wouldn't just need to do this for one. You could do this for as many as you want. This is the XML view on ArcGISOnline, so you can see this is the ISO 19115 ISO standard, and you can see where again those extents values have been updated. Yeah, so that's basic. That's the end of my first demo there. And let me just continue. So this is just a review of what we've covered with some of the updates. These are the steps for harvesting the metadata. They're generating timestamps, extracting things like, there's also the ability to extract field names. There's a good idea. I have an XML validator, so it's a good idea to validate your XML before you try to update it. And then this is just to emphasize that it's the metadata XML property. That's what we're updating. And a little hint there, you can actually use HTML in that. So that's, after a bit of trial and error, I figured out that's the way to format your data. And there's the result. So besides writing metadata to ArcGISOnline, we also support updating geodatabase metadata. There's a really good article on our knowledge base for how to do that. I don't have time today to run through it. So in this case, you do something very similar, but instead of writing to the metadata XML property, you're writing to a field called GeoDB metadata string. And so that's one of the modes of the FME's geodatabase writer that allows you to automate the update of geodatabase metadata. So that's just what that workflow looks like. And then there's also the ability to use XML updater. So we have another article that, so why would you not use the templater, but use XML updater? So in the case where you only want to make one or two changes, let's say you're just changing the mod date or changing an extent, but you're leaving everything else the same, you could use XML updater, because what that does is it just operates on one part of the metadata document, and you don't have to worry about generating everything else. So the updater is a handy tool, and I'm going to show you now how to do this just with one record, one metadata document that I downloaded from ArcGIS Online. And here we're going to use the XSD-based XML reader and writer. We don't have a special metadata reader writer. We just use the XML reader and writer. But just as we run this demo, just a comment that this text line input-output could easily be a data feed from an API call. So we could just be interacting with an API, reading the metadata and updating one property and then writing it back. So let's have a look at a bit more detail at that demo. Just a sec while we spin that up. So first of all, we're just going to build this from scratch. So we read the source metadata that we want to update. And again, this could come from a feature service or locally a local file. In this case, I'm just using a local copy of the metadata. So there's the source metadata. And my goal is going to be, right in here, I have the responsible party individual is just none. So I just want to basically add my name to this data and say this is something that I've worked on, and so I'm going to update it with my name. So first of all, before we bother to run the XML updater, it's always a good idea to make sure the metadata is valid. So we check for the syntax. Next, we can define the property that we're going to update. In this case, just the contact name. And then we're going to add the XML updater. And again, this is a little bit more of a somewhat intermediate advanced when you start getting into editing XML, because you have to do things like figure out what the feature path is. We're showing you what's possible, and we have lots of tutorials. If you're newer to XML, there's lots of tutorials to give you background on how to do that. So we have a bit of a shortcut here. We have to figure out what the path is in the XML to update. We don't actually have a GUI for that in the XML updater. So what I'm doing is a little shortcut. I'm using the XSD XML reader with the tree control to navigate the structure of the data and find out the path I need for update. I'm not actually going to keep the XML reader. I'm just using the GUI to get that update path. And then I'm going to paste that in to the expression. First of all, we read the text line data. That's what we're going to update. We're going to replace the context of that path and pasting that. That's what I got from the XML reader. And I'm just going to put, just to expedite this, I just typed it in, but I could put the attribute value dynamically in there. I have to connect both the document and the update to the input. In this case, it's a little bit of a trick. And then all we have to do now is assign the output to overwrite text line data and write that back out. And then when we run this, you're going to see that we've managed to update that. So the XML updater is a very powerful transformer for doing those kind of bulk changes of just a few properties. Obviously, you wouldn't want to do that to write out the whole document, because there would be a lot of updated expressions. But for just a few properties, that's certainly a handy way to go. So let's just tie this in and run, and then we'll have a look at the output. And Notepad++, if you are using that, make sure you have the XML extensions. And yeah, it's always good to have that formatted. So there's, you can see my name has been added. So it used to be unknown or none, and now we have my name in there. So you could update whole segments in there as well, number of properties.